My name is Aloan, 34 years old. The highway stretched endlessly in front of me, pale gray beneath a sky that couldn't decide between sunshine and storm. I had been driving since dawn, the kind of long drive that makes you feel both restless and numb at the same time. In the back seat, wrapped in layers of linen, sat a wooden keepsake box, something my father once carved with his own hands. Inside it, I'd placed a pair of silver candlesticks that had passed from my grandmother to me. Tonight, I planned to give them to my brother, Darius, as a gesture of blessing for his engagement. His house was 12 hours away, but I told myself the distance was nothing compared to the years we had once shared. Back when we were children, there had been no miles between us. I remembered sitting on the banks of Pine River with fishing poles too big for our hands, daring each other to catch the first perch. Darius always cheated, tugging his line to pretend he had a bite, and I would laugh until my sides ached, pretending not to notice his trick. Somewhere between Illinois farmland and Missouri hills, those memories kept me company. We had whispered secrets beneath quilted forts, invented stories on long car rides, and leaned on each other when our parents fought in the kitchen. I thought about the nights when Darius would sneak into my room after a nightmare, insisting he wasn't scared, only bored. That was the boy I wanted to see again, the one I was willing to drive half a day for. But the truth was heavier. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as I admitted to myself that the candlesticks were more than a gift. They were a plea to be remembered, to be valued, to remind Darius that no matter how far he'd drifted, I had never stopped being his sister. The hours grew heavier as the road narrowed into smaller towns. Gas stations blurred together, coffee cups stacked on the passenger seat. My shoulders ached, but my chest carried a stubborn hope. Whatever distance time had built between us, I believed this dinner could be a bridge. An engagement wasn't just a milestone. It was the start of a new family, a chance to remember the old bonds that mattered. And yet, a whisper in my mind kept circling. What if he didn't want that bridge anymore? By the time I crossed into his city, the sky had gone soft and gray, the kind that holds its breath before rain. I adjusted the keepsake box on the seat beside me and whispered to myself as if the candlesticks could hear, "This is worth it." His neighborhood was quiet when I turned onto his street. Every lawn looked clipped to the same length, porches carried identical wreaths. It was the kind of place where appearances mattered, where silence could be mistaken for perfection. Darius's house stood taller than I expected. Clean lines, sharp angles, glass, reflecting the dim light. Nothing like the warm, cluttered home we grew up in. This house felt like it had been built to keep the world out. I sat for a moment with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, telling myself the long drive had been worth it. Yet my heart beat too fast, as if bracing for something my mind refused to name. The wooden keepsake box felt heavier when I lifted it from the seat. I straightened my shoulders, walked up the steps, and knocked for a few seconds. At first, there was only the faint sound of laughter from inside, a kind of laughter that belonged to gatherings, to glasses raised, to warmth that excluded me. Then the door swung open. Maribel stood there, her hand still on the knob. Her eyes widened just enough to betray surprise before settling into something cooler, more guarded. She looked past me, as though checking whether anyone else had come, then back at the box in my arms. I forced warmth into my voice. "I brought something for the engagement dinner." She tilted her head, lips curving into a thin smile. "Oh." Her tone was light, practiced. "They had the dinner yesterday." The words landed like stones, each one sinking deeper. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. "Yesterday?" "Just close family," she added, almost as an afterthought, though her eyes didn't waver from mine. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My arms tightened around the box until it seemed to burn. Behind her, I caught the sound of glasses clinking, chairs scraping, the hum of voices I wasn't meant to hear. The porch smelled faintly of pine cleaner, the kind Maribel probably used to scrub surfaces spotless. The air between us, though, felt thick with something sour. My mind spun. I had driven 12 hours. I had rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd smile, how I'd hold out the candlesticks like an offering of peace. And all of it crumbled in 3 words. Yesterday, just family. Yet wasn't I family? My lips parted, but no words came out. Somewhere deep inside, an old memory stirred, of standing in the rain at age 15, waiting for Darius to pick me up after practice. He never came. I had walked home alone, soaked, teeth chattering, telling myself he must have forgotten. And now, here I was again, standing at another threshold, waiting for him. And again, he wasn't there. Maribel's smile didn't change, but her hand on the doorknob shifted slightly, a subtle signal that my presence was already too long. For one fragile second, I thought Darius might appear behind her. He'd laugh, pull me inside, say it was all a mix-up, but the seconds stretched and no one came. "Maybe another time," Maribel said softly, almost politely, almost like a dismissal rehearsed. And then the door began to close. I stood frozen, the weight of the box in my arms crushing, the threshold between us more solid than any wall. My ears caught the muffled sound of laughter inside, the clink of glasses, the scraping of forks on plates. It sounded like celebration. It sounded like belonging. But not for me. The door clicked shut, quiet and final. The porch light glowed behind me, but no one opened the door again. No voice called my name. The night air pressed cold against my skin, though the sky hadn't yet broken into rain. I shifted the box in my arms, staring at the wood carved by our father, and for the first time, the candlesticks inside felt less like a blessing and more like a burden. I whispered into the silence. It was supposed to matter. But the only answer was laughter, muffled and distant, as though I had already been erased from the picture. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not loudly, not with anger, but quietly, the way ice fractures beneath the surface of a river, invisible but irreversible. For a long moment, I just stood there on the porch, the keepsake box pressing against my ribs as though it had gained the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made. The laughter inside continued, muffled through the walls, carrying the shape of joy, but none of it meant for me. The porch light hummed faintly, its glow turning the polished wood of Maribel's door into something sterile. I thought about knocking again, about demanding to see Darius, but I knew what would happen. She'd either refuse, or worse, she'd fetch him, and I'd see that same polite detachment in his eyes, the kind that said, "You're not supposed to be here." I descended the steps slowly, my shoes echoing against the concrete walkway. My car sat waiting in the driveway, its windows reflecting the porch light. The whole neighborhood was quiet, except for the faint hum of voices drifting from other houses, families gathered, conversations alive, belongings stitched into their walls. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt stitched in anywhere. Sliding into the driver's seat, I placed the box gently on the passenger side, but it stared back like an accusation. My arms still ached from holding it at the threshold, waiting for a welcome that never came. I turned the engine on, the vibration filling the silence, but I didn't move. My phone sat in the cup holder. I stared at it, half expecting Darius's name to appear on the screen, some hurried apology, some flimsy explanation. But nothing came. Nothing. As I pulled out of the driveway, I kept glancing at the front of the house, waiting for the door to burst open, for Darius to step out, call my name, wave me back. But the door remained shut, its light unwavering, like a sentinel guarding a place I no longer had permission to enter. The streets blurred as I drove away. Houses trimmed in perfect symmetry lined the road, their windows glowing softly. I caught glimpses of families through sheer curtains, parents setting dishes down, children laughing, couples leaning close over glasses of wine. Each lit window was a reminder of where I didn't belong. By the time I reached the edge of town, the highway stretched out before me like a dark ribbon, leading me nowhere in particular. My chest tightened. I couldn't face 12 more hours of road with this rejection burning in me. Not tonight. A buzzing neon sign appeared up ahead, flickering weakly against the night. Motel vacancy. I pulled into the lot, gravel crunching under my tires. The place looked tired, its paint peeling, its windows yellowed, but it was shelter. Inside, the clerk barely looked up as he slid the key across the counter. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. I set the keepsake box on the small table by the bed, its polished wood catching the weak glow of the lamp. Then I sat down on the stiff mattress, shoulders slumped, staring at the cracks that ran like veins across the ceiling. I had thought the candlesticks would be a bridge, something to remind Darius of who we had been, but now they looked like relics of a family that no longer existed. My phone stayed silent on the table. No message, no missed call. The longer it stayed dark, the clearer it became. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a forgotten invitation. It was deliberate. And the more I thought about it, the more the past began to unravel inside me. I remembered the time I drove 6 hours for his birthday, showing up with a cake in the back seat, only to discover he had gone camping with Maribel's family. No call, no explanation, just gone. I remembered the countless times he promised to call me back, swore he'd update me, and never did. I remembered wiring him money when he was desperate, watching him swear it was temporary, only to see the months bleed into years with nothing returned. The pattern was always the same. I waited. He didn't show. I gave. He took. A bitter laugh slipped from my throat, startling me in the quiet room. I pressed a hand over my mouth, shaking my head at myself. Why had I believed this time would be different? Why had I imagined that an engagement dinner, of all things, would suddenly draw me back into the circle? I lay back on the bed, but sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the door closing. Maribel's polite smile, the faint clinking of glasses behind her. I tried to remember the warmth of our childhood, but even those memories began to sting. Sometime near dawn, I gave up trying to sleep. I sat up, the motel curtains leaking pale light. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow, my eyes ringed with exhaustion. The box still sat on the table, unopened, untouched, like a witness to my humiliation. I picked it up, running my fingers over the carved grooves my father had made decades ago. He had once told us that the box was meant to hold things that carried meaning, that every object inside it should be chosen with care. I had believed giving the candlesticks to Darius would mean passing on more than silver. It would mean passing on history, blessing, memory. But if he wouldn't even open the door for me, what meaning would they carry in his house? My stomach twisted. For the first time, I felt the faintest thread of anger winding itself around my grief. By the time I finally drove home, the sky was overcast, the air thick with the smell of impending rain. The long hours on the highway gave me too much time to think, and each thought cut deeper. The house felt colder than usual when I arrived, the silence pressing in on me. I set the keepsake box on the hall table, unable to meet its gaze. Then, almost without thinking, I walked into my study and pulled open the drawer I rarely touched. It was a plain wooden drawer, but I knew exactly what it held, the quiet history of every sacrifice I had made for Darius. The first envelope I pulled out was marked with smudged ink, a loan agreement written by hand. $12,000, money I had scraped together from savings meant for repairs on my roof. He promised he'd pay it back within a year, swore it was the beginning of something solid. That business had collapsed before the ink on his plans dried. The repayment never came. Beneath it was another stack of papers, property tax notices stamped in red. The year he called me nearly in tears, claiming he and Maribel were about to lose the house in Flagstaff. I wired $27,000 the next morning without hesitation. He said he'd never forget it, that he'd make it right. Years later, he still hadn't. The drawer was full of stories like that. Promises, pleas, my sacrifices recorded in numbers and ink. I stared at the papers, the weight of them pressing down on me harder than the keepsake box ever could. A realization crept in, sharp and merciless. I wasn't just excluded from one dinner. I had been excluded from his life for years, except when he needed me. And maybe, just maybe, I had allowed it. The thought made my chest ache, but it also lit something fragile and dangerous in me. The beginning of a resolve I hadn't known I was capable of. I sat at my desk, staring at the drawer I had pulled open, the stack of documents spread across the surface like scars I had carved into myself. Each envelope, each slip of paper, was more than just numbers. It was a ledger of love twisted into obligation. The smudged ink of the first loan stared back at me. $12,000. I remembered that night vividly. Darius had come to me with eyes alight, his words tumbling over each other with excitement about his new business venture. This time it'll work, Eloin. I just need a boost, a little faith. You've always believed in me more than anyone. I had believed him. I always did. I remembered my hand shaking slightly as I wrote that check, telling myself it was an investment not just in his future, but in our bond. He hugged me, whispered, "You won't regret this," and for a brief moment, I didn't. But businesses close, dreams collapse, and years later, all I had left was that slip of paper and silence. I set it aside, pulling out the next memory. Property tax notices, red-stamped, threatening foreclosure. His voice had cracked over the phone that night, desperation raw in every word. "They'll take the house, Eloin. Maribel will never forgive me. Please, I can't let her down. I'll pay you back as soon as things are stable. Just this once." Just this once. I wired $27,000 before dawn. My own mortgage went unpaid that month, And I remember sitting in my kitchen with the lights off, drinking stale coffee, telling myself family came first. He called me the next day, gratitude dripping from his voice. You saved us, Eloin. You saved my family. And I smiled through tears, convinced that meant something. But gratitude fades faster than ink. The months became years, and the debt remained only mine. I spread the papers across the desk one by one. Credit card statements next, the ones in my name but swiped by his hand. For emergencies only, I had told him. At first it was small. Groceries, gas, a flight for work. Then dinners I was never invited to, hotel stays I never saw, expenses he never explained. And every month I paid it off, swallowing the questions like bitter pills. Each document looked less like generosity and more like chains I had clasped around my own wrists. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples, the hum of the quiet house pressing in on me. For years, I had told myself this was love, that sacrificing for him, covering his debts, cleaning up his messes, meant I was a good sister. But staring at those papers, I realized the truth. Love twisted into obligation stops looking like love at all. It starts looking like weakness. The thought made my stomach churn. I picked up the credit card, holding it in my hand. The plastic felt warm from my grip, its edges softened from years of use. My name was printed across it, bold and clear. Yet it had never really belonged to me. I turned it over, staring at the number embossed into its surface, thinking about how many times it had been handed across counters I'd never see. How many times it had paid for moments of his life that I wasn't part of. A whisper slipped through my mind, almost like my father's voice. Who do you belong to, Eloin? Him or yourself? I closed my eyes, phone in hand, and dialed the number on the back of the card. The automated voice was polite, almost cheerful, asking me to confirm my identity. Then a woman came on the line, her tone efficient but kind. How may I help you today? My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. I want to cancel this card, effective immediately. She asked me twice if I was sure. Each time I said yes, my voice steadier than I expected. Within minutes, the line went silent, and so did a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I placed the phone down on the desk, staring at the stack of papers. The silence of the house pressed against me, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't hollow. It wasn't suffocating. It felt sharper, freer, as though space had been returned to me. I sat back, breathing slowly. For years, guilt had dictated my choices. Every time Darius called, every time he pleaded, I heard the boy I once knew, the one who climbed into my room after nightmares. I mistook his need for closeness as proof of love. But what had I gotten in return? A door shut in my face. Laughter through walls I wasn't welcome to enter. The realization hit me like cold water. Maybe respect had never been missing from him. It had been missing from me. My chest ached, not with regret, but with clarity. I gathered the papers back into the drawer, each one sliding in like a confession I was finally ready to put to rest. I closed the drawer gently, almost ceremonially, as though laying a tombstone over the years I had spent sacrificing myself in silence. The credit card, now useless, sat in my palm. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash. The sound of plastic against metal was sharper than I expected, almost triumphant. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like Darius's shadow. I felt like myself. But even as that thought settled in me, a flicker of unease crept in. Darius would find out soon. He would call, his voice shifting between anger and persuasion, trying on masks the way he always did. He would remind me of every time I had saved him, remind me that family doesn't abandon family. And for the first time, I would have to answer differently. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the sky turn heavy with the threat of rain. The roses in the garden bent gently in the wind, petals trembling. I wondered if I was ready for what was coming. Because the truth was, canceling that card wasn't just cutting off money. It was cutting off the last thread of control he had over me. And men like Darius didn't let go of control quietly. A storm was coming. I could feel it. 5 days passed before the phone finally rang. I was outside trimming the last of the late summer roses, their petals already bruised with the touch of autumn, when the screen lit up with Darius's name. For a moment, I simply watched it buzz in my hand. I remembered all the times I had called him only to be ignored. Messages left unread, voicemails erased by silence. But now, here he was, reaching for me. A part of me wanted to let it ring out, to enjoy the quiet victory of turning away, but curiosity, or maybe habit, made me swipe my thumb across the screen. LON! His voice shot through the line, sharp and uneven. The card doesn't work. No greeting, no pause, just panic pressed into words. I could hear voices in the background. Maribel's clipped, urgent tone, a baby crying, high and frantic, the muffled knock of someone at the door, papers shuffled against a hard surface. The edges of his world sounded frayed, unraveling. I tried it 3 times, he continued, his breath quick. They said it was declined. We've got bills here, people waiting. What's going on? I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to hear my breath steady. Then I said it, calm and clear. I canceled it. For a second, all I heard was the hiss of the line, static catching at the edges. Then came the disbelief, tumbling out in fragments. You what? LON, you can't just, how are we supposed to? It was never supposed to be yours, I cut in, my voice quiet but sharp. Silence. Then, the sound of him exhaling hard, the scrape of something being pushed aside. His tone shifted, his words slowing, softer now. The voice I knew too well. Look, I just need some time, just until I sort things out. I'll pay you back, I swear this time. This time. The phrase rang hollow, echoing against all the other promises that had rotted before they could bloom. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of the roses, their sweetness threaded with thorns. I've heard that before. His voice cracked slightly, swinging again into anger. So what? You're just going to leave me hanging? After everything I've done for you? After everything we've been through? The words pierced, but not as deeply as they once did. I opened my eyes, staring at the petals scattered on the soil. What you've done for me. My voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the strain of holding back years of unsaid truth. Darius, the only thing you've ever given me is silence. The line went quiet. I imagined him pacing, running his hand through his hair the way he did when cornered. Don't do this, LON, he finally said, voice slipping into something almost boyish, almost pleading. You don't understand what's at stake. There it was again, the phrase that made my stomach knot. What's at stake? A phrase too heavy for bills, too sharp for excuses, something darker pressed beneath it. But I didn't ask, not yet. I'm not doing this anymore, I said instead, steady now. Not the debts, not the lies, not the waiting. His words rushed back, frantic, tumbling over each other like stones in a flood. Please, please, LON, don't turn your back on me. Family doesn't do that. Family. I cut the call before he could finish. The silence that followed was startling, a clean severing. I stood there in the garden, phone still in my hand, the roses swaying gently in the breeze. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to fix his chaos. I wasn't reaching for my checkbook or my phone or my excuses. I was still, solid. But as the adrenaline ebbed, unease replaced it. He would call again, and again. Men like Darius didn't stop at one plea. They knew how to bend words, how to wrap guilt in silk, how to shift from anger to persuasion to desperation. And I had always known, that I was vulnerable to him. I went back inside, setting the phone on the counter as though it carried heat. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to feel suffocating after Thomas died. But tonight it felt different, not hollow, not empty, just mine. Still, as I moved through the rooms, a chill followed me. His words looped in my mind. You don't understand what's at stake. What did that mean? Bills and groceries didn't sound like stakes. They sounded like excuses. Stakes were higher, sharper, dangerous. I tried to shake it off, but a sliver of dread lodged itself inside me. By the time I went to bed, I expected the churn of regret to keep me awake. Instead, I closed my eyes and drifted quickly into sleep, chest unburdened, the steady beat of my heart louder than any echo of guilt. But in the quiet hours before dawn, I dreamed. Not of roses or candlesticks or doors shutting. I dreamed of standing in a house that wasn't mine, watching shadows stretch across unfamiliar walls. And in the dream, I heard Darius's voice, not pleading, not angry, but whispering, "You don't know what you've done." I woke with a start, sweat chilling my skin. The silence of the house pressed close, but it no longer felt like peace. It felt like the pause before a storm. The calls began almost immediately. That first night, my phone lit up 3 more times with Darius's name. I let them buzz unanswered, the screen glowing like a siren in the darkened kitchen. By morning, there were 4 voicemails waiting, though I didn't listen to them right away. Part of me was afraid that if I heard his voice, I'd weaken. But curiosity, always my downfall, won. The first message was clipped, sharp with anger. What the hell, LON? You can't just cancel it without telling me? Do you know how embarrassing this is? I've got people here waiting on me, and God, you've humiliated me. The second came only an hour later, the tone softened, coaxing. Look, I get it. You're upset. Maybe I've let you down before, but you know me. You know I'm good for it. I just need a little time. Please don't make this bigger than it is. The third was slower, his voice heavy with what almost sounded like sorrow. I don't know why you'd do this to me, to us. Family doesn't turn their backs when things get rough. I never thought you of all people would. The fourth was barely coherent, words slurring, his desperation bleeding through. Please, Eloan, just this once. Don't leave me hanging. Don't. The message ended abruptly, as though he'd run out of words or courage. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone, my stomach tight. I knew these patterns. Darius's voice had always been a chameleon. When one tone didn't work, he'd slip into another. Anger, reason, guilt, sorrow. He had cycled through them since we were children, learning early that words could be weapons, that charm could bend people faster than truth. And I had always bent, but not now. Not when I could still hear Maribel's voice, smooth and dismissive, saying, yesterday, just close family. Not when I could still feel the cold slam of that door shutting me out. The next day he called again. I answered this time. Eloan. His voice cracked with urgency. Thank God. You have to listen. You don't understand what's at stake. There it was again, that phrase. My hand tightened around the phone. What's at stake, Darius? I asked, forcing calm into my voice. Tell me. A pause. Paper rustled faintly in the background. Then Maribel's muffled voice rose, sharp and frantic. Darius lowered his tone, almost whispering. It's complicated. Not something I can explain right now. Just, please, trust me. I'll make it right. But I need that card. My breath slowed. You've been saying that for 10 years. You think I don't remember? His words sharpened, desperate now. Every dollar, every favor. You think I've forgotten? I haven't. I carry it every day. But this is different, Eloan. If you walk away now... He trailed off. If I walk away now, what? Silence. The line crackled. Then, quietly, you'll regret it. A chill shot down my spine. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. More like a prophecy. I already regret it, I whispered, and ended the call. The phone rang again within the hour, and again that evening. Then the next morning. Each time, his voice shifted, bending like a man trying on masks. At first there was anger, sharp syllables meant to corner me. You're selfish. Do you think you're better than me? Sitting up there in that house, pretending you're above family. Then came reason, smoother, coaxing. Come on, Eloan, we've always had each other. Don't let one mistake erase everything. You don't want to lose me over this. Then guilt. If this falls apart, it'll be on you. Do you understand that? You'll have to live with it. Finally, desperation. The voice of a boy again, trembling, afraid. Please don't leave me. Don't let me fall. I can't do this without you. Each time I listened. Each time I remembered the old rhythm of persuasion. How he used to smile when he needed something. How he could weave charm into guilt until I couldn't tell one from the other. But standing in my kitchen now, phone pressed to my ear, I realized the spell was broken. His words no longer warmed me. They chilled me. They reminded me of how much I had given away without question. Late one night, after ignoring another call, I opened my phone to distract myself. Maribel's world spilled across the screen, her social media glowing bright and polished. Photos of dinner parties, glasses raised high, captions full of joy. She tagged Darius in every one, their smiles flawless, their table crowded. There was no sign of bills unpaid. No trace of calls left unanswered, no shadow of the panic I had heard in his voice. It was a performance, for themselves, for their friends, maybe even for me. They could erase me from the story with a smile, just as easily as they had shut the door in my face. I stared at their glowing faces, my jaw tightening. If they were so destitute, so desperate, why did their lives look like champagne and laughter? Where had my money gone? Where had all my sacrifices been poured? And then, like a crack of thunder, the truth began to form. It wasn't just mismanagement. It wasn't just carelessness. There was something darker beneath it. Some reason Darius's voice had whispered, "You don't understand what's at stake." I set the phone down, the weight of it heavy in my palm. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel cruel. I felt angry. Because love may forgive mistakes, but love does not tolerate lies. And deep in my gut, I knew I hadn't even begun to uncover the biggest lie yet. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Darius's calls slowed, though they didn't stop entirely. Each time his name lit up my phone, I felt the old reflex twitch inside me, the urge to answer, to soften, to rescue. But I didn't. I let the calls ring out. I let his words dissolve into unanswered air. Without the card charges bleeding through my statements, I saw numbers I hadn't seen in years. For the first time in over a decade, my bank account belonged to me. The first choice I made was practical. I logged into my mortgage account and sent an extra payment. Watching the balance drop on the screen gave me a satisfaction that had nothing to do with numbers. It felt like control, like finally steering my own ship after years of being dragged by someone else's current. The second choice was for joy. I signed up for an art class at the community center, something I had postponed 100 times because there wasn't money to spare. The first Thursday evening, I walked into that bright room smelling of paint and clay, strangers seated at long tables with brushes in hand. I dipped mine into paint, spread color across a blank canvas, and felt something in me loosen. The strokes weren't perfect, but they were mine. Every line was a declaration. I exist outside of Darius, outside of sacrifice. The third choice was for others. I wrote a quiet check to the women's shelter downtown, no name attached, no recognition needed. I knew what it felt like to give without being seen. But this time, it wasn't about being erased. It was about standing with people who deserved more than silence. Each act was small on its own, but together they felt like a rhythm, a new melody taking shape. What had once been siphoned away by his debts was now building something solid, something that belonged only to me. Yet even as I painted, as I balanced budgets, as I breathed a freer kind of air, unease lingered. His last words to me played over and over. "You don't understand what's at stake." Stakes. That wasn't the language of late bills or grocery money. That was the language of desperation, of secrets pressed too tightly to admit. I told myself not to dwell on it, but the more I tried, the more the silence between us thickened, not with peace, but with storm clouds. One night, unable to sleep, I walked into the hallway where the keepsake box still sat on the table. Its wood glowed faintly in the lamplight, carved by my father's steady hands. I brushed my fingers across it, remembering how he had said, "Whatever you place inside this box should matter. It should outlast you." I thought of the candlesticks inside, silver glinting like ghosts of promises. I had meant to give them to Darius as a blessing. Now they felt like a test. Could I still trust him with something meant to carry our family's memory forward? I couldn't bring myself to open the lid. Not yet. Instead, I carried it to my study, setting it beside my desk where the drawer of sacrifices still rested. 2 boxes, one filled with debts and broken promises, the other with legacy and history. I realized I was standing between them, between the weight of what I had lost and the question of what I was still willing to give. The next morning, I woke to another missed call. His voice had grown hoarser in the new voicemail, brittle like glass about to shatter. "Eloan, please, you're making a mistake. I can't explain it over the phone, but you have to trust me. If you don't, I don't know what's going to happen." I deleted it without listening to the end, but the words stayed anyway. "If you don't, I don't know what's going to happen." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even guilt. It was fear, and I couldn't decide which was worse, that he feared for himself or that he feared for someone else. By the second week, the calls grew sporadic. The silence stretched, and I began to hope he had given up. But one evening, as I washed my paintbrushes in the kitchen sink, the phone buzzed with a new notification. Not a call. A tag. Maribel's latest post lit the screen. A dinner table crowded with friends, wine glasses raised. Her caption read, "Another perfect night with family. Nothing stronger than love." There he was beside her, smiling broad and bright, arm around her shoulders. I gripped the phone tighter, bile rising in my throat. Perfect night. Family. Stronger than love. The same man who left frantic messages on my voicemail now raised glasses and toasts like his world was flawless. But what unsettled me most wasn't the post. It was the way his smile looked, too wide, too polished, like a mask stretched too tightly across his face. A mask hiding something crumbling beneath. I set the phone down, heart pounding. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I wanted to see cracks where there were none. And yet, a whisper threaded through me, sharp and quiet. He's hiding something, Eloin, something bigger than money, something he's afraid to say out loud. I turned toward the window, the night pressing against the glass. The roses in the garden bent low under the weight of the wind. The storm hadn't broken yet, but I could feel it coming. And I knew, deep in my bones, that when it did, I would be standing in the middle of it. The call came late, long after the house had settled into its usual stillness. I had just set down my paintbrush, the smell of turpentine lingering on my fingers, when the phone buzzed across the counter. Darius's name lit up the screen. For a long moment, I only stared at it, my chest tightening. Every instinct told me not to answer. But something in the way the letters of his name glowed against the dark screen pulled me in. I swiped to accept. Eloin. His voice was low, heavy, not sharp with anger, not slick with persuasion, just weary. I need to talk to you. I didn't respond right away. Silence has its own power, I had learned. He went on. I've made mistakes. A lot of them, more than I can count. I know I've let you down, but it wasn't because I didn't care. You've always been there for me, more than anyone, and I took advantage of that. His words should have struck me as an apology, but instead they felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd recited before. What do you want, Darius? My voice was quiet, steady. A pause. I could hear him breathing, the faint sound of something clattering in the background. Maybe a glass set down too hard, maybe a door closing. I want to make things right. I can't lose you, Eloin. Not you. Family's all I've got. I almost laughed, bitter and sharp. Family? The word felt foreign in my mouth. You closed the door in my face. Or maybe Maribel did it for you. Same thing. I didn't know, he said quickly, too quickly. I swear I didn't know she'd do that. A silence followed, not the silence of guilt, but of calculation. I closed my eyes, the memory of that slammed door pressing against me. Whether you knew or not, you let it happen. You've been letting it happen for years. Every time I wait for you, every time I cover for you, every time I hand you something I can't afford to lose, you let it happen. He exhaled shakily. I thought you understood. I do, I said, my voice sharper now. I understand that you've been using me. The line went quiet. Then, almost breaking, he whispered, Please, Eloin, don't give up on me. Not now. And there it was, the old plea, the one that had bent me every time before. But tonight, something was different. I felt the weight of the keepsake box in the study, resting beside the drawer of sacrifices. 2 boxes, 2 legacies. And I realized I had a choice. I walked into the study as he spoke, the phone pressed to my ear. The keepsake box glowed faintly under the lamplight. I set my hand on it, fingers tracing the grooves my father had carved. This, I said softly, more to myself than to him, was supposed to be yours. The candlesticks, the blessing, the memory of everything we once were. His breath caught. Then give them to me. Please, Eloin, that's all I need. A chance to prove. No, my voice cut through his. Clear, final. You don't deserve them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with something unspoken. For a moment, I thought he might lash out, that his voice would sharpen into anger again, but instead it dropped lower, colder. You don't understand what you're doing, he murmured. A chill slid down my spine. Maybe not, but I understand what I'm not doing anymore. I'm not carrying you. The words felt like stepping off a ledge and finding solid ground beneath me. I ended the call before he could answer. The house around me was silent, but it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of boundaries. I lifted the keepsake box gently and carried it to the cabinet drawer where I kept the things that mattered most. Sliding it inside, I locked it with a small brass key. It no longer felt like a gift withheld. It felt like preservation, waiting for someone who would understand its weight, who would treat it with the reverence it deserved. I stood there for a long time, my hand resting on the drawer, my breath steady. For years, I had equated family with obligation, love with sacrifice, silence with loyalty. But now I saw them for what they were, choices I had been making, choices I could stop. And in that realization, I felt the ground beneath me steady. Yet even in that steadiness, unease lingered. His words repeated in my head, "You don't understand what you're doing." It wasn't just a brother's bitterness. It was something darker, a shadow of truth I hadn't yet uncovered. I turned off the light in the study and stood in the doorway, staring into the dim hallway. For the first time in years, I felt strong. But strength didn't erase the storm I sensed gathering. Because I knew Darius. And Darius never let go without a fight. The first hint came from someone I hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sun looks pale and the air smells faintly of rain that never comes. I was in the grocery store, distracted by rows of canned soup when I heard a voice behind me. "Elowen!" I turned. Standing there with a basket of produce was Martin Halloway, an old acquaintance from town. He had once worked with Darius years ago, back when Darius's business ventures were still bright promises. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, but Martin's eyes darted, restless. He lowered his voice. "You spoken to your brother lately?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Why? He shifted the basket in his hands. "Because he's in deeper than you realize. Some people in the city are talking. He's borrowed money from the wrong folks. Not banks, Elowen. Lenders who don't forgive late payments." The words seemed to slice through the air. I felt cold, even in the heat of the store. Martin went on, his voice barely above a whisper. "If he doesn't pay, it won't just be his problem. They'll come after his family, maybe even you, if they think you're still his safety net." I managed to nod, lips pressed tight, and after a few more polite exchanges, we parted ways. But the world felt tilted, as though the aisle beneath my feet had shifted. Back in the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, Martin's words replaying like a warning bell. I had known Darius was reckless. I had known he leaned on me too much, but this was something darker. At home, I tried to distract myself with painting, but the brush trembled in my hand. The colors blurred together, no longer soothing. Every sound outside made me flinch. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, the phone rang. This time, it wasn't Darius. It was Maribel. Her name flashing across my screen sent a shock through me. She had never called me directly before. I hesitated, finger hovering. Finally, I answered. Her voice was tight, clipped, nothing like the polished charm she put online. "Elowen, I don't have much time." I didn't bother hiding my skepticism. "Why are you calling me?" A pause, then, "Because he's not telling you everything, and I can't do this alone anymore." I leaned back, heart hammering. "What are you talking about?" Her words spilled quickly, as though she had rehearsed them. "The money, the card, the loans. I know you've been covering for him. I know how much you've given, and I know he never told you the truth." My grip tightened on the phone. "What truth?" She exhaled shakily. "He's been gambling, Elowen, not just casually. Big stakes, hidden debts. Some of the money you gave him, it didn't go to bills or taxes. It went to tables, to games, to men who don't forget losses." My stomach dropped. Suddenly, "You don't understand what's at stake" made sense. Maribel's voice wavered. "I thought I could manage it. I thought I could hold everything together, but I can't. He's drowning us. And I—" Her words broke, softer now. "I don't know how much longer before someone comes knocking at our door." I closed my eyes, pressing a hand to my forehead. "Why are you telling me this now, after everything you've done to keep me out?" "Because he's burning us all down," she whispered. "And maybe you're the only one he'll listen to." Bitterness rose in my throat. "You shut the door in my face, Maribel. You laughed while I stood outside." Her silence on the line was heavy, then, softly, "And I regret it. But regret doesn't fix this. Please, I'm asking you, not as his wife, but as someone who's just as trapped as you've been. Don't let him drag us under." I should have hung up. I should have told her it wasn't my problem anymore. But her voice carried something I hadn't expected. Fear. Real, raw fear. And beneath that fear, a confession I hadn't been ready to face, that Darius's betrayals weren't just mine to bear. We ended the call with no promises made, only silence hanging between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the study with the keepsake box on the table, its carved wood catching the lamplight. I thought about the candlesticks inside, about how they had passed through generations, with the hope of being cherished, preserved. How could I give them to a man who gambled away everything else? I unlocked the drawer of sacrifices and spread the papers again. Loan agreements, tax notices, credit card bills, and now, layered over them, Maribel's trembling words. Gambling. Men who don't forget losses. The ledger wasn't just financial anymore, it was moral. It was survival. At midnight, the phone buzzed again. A message from Darius. We need to talk tomorrow, no excuses. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Tomorrow. The reckoning wasn't just coming, it was here. And though I had locked the candlesticks away, I knew this wasn't about heirlooms anymore. It was about truth, about survival, about whether I would finally sever the chain or be dragged down with him. For the first time, I wasn't sure if love or blood or history could shield me from what was coming. All right, this will be the final and most decisive chapter. I'll now write Part 9, Legacy and Release, bringing all the threads together. Darius's lies, Maribel's fear, Eloin's reckoning, and the ultimate choice about the family legacy. This section will be 1,100 words, with cinematic closure and emotional depth. I'll end with completed. And Part 9, Legacy and Release. The next evening, I drove to meet him. Darius had insisted on neutral ground, an old diner on the edge of town where the neon lights flickered, buzzing faintly against the dusk. I parked beneath the broken sign, heart drumming as I saw his car already there. Inside, the diner smelled of grease and coffee that had been sitting too long. He was in a booth at the back, shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed. When he looked up, I saw it immediately. The wear, the sleeplessness, the way desperation clung to him like sweat. Eloin, he said, voice too soft to be casual. I slid into the booth across from him, hands folded tightly on the table. Say what you need to say. He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled hard. You canceled the card. You cut me off. I thought I hated you for it. His hands flexed against the table, restless. But maybe you were right. I've been reckless. Reckless? My voice was sharp. You've been gambling, Darius, with my money, with your family's safety. His head snapped up, eyes wide. She told you. Yes, I said simply. For a moment, the mask cracked. His face folded with something raw, almost like shame. But then it shifted, anger flaring, jaw tight. You don't understand. Then make me understand, I demanded. My voice trembled, but I didn't back down. All these years, I've given you everything. My savings, my time, my silence, and still you kept me outside. So tell me, Darius, what is it you've been hiding? He leaned back, rubbing his face. It wasn't supposed to get this far. It started small, just games with friends, then bigger tables, bigger bets, and every time I thought I could win it back. For Maribel, for the baby, for the house. But the losses. His voice cracked. The losses grew teeth, and now they're at my door. I felt my stomach twist. At your door or mine? His eyes flicked to me, haunted. Both. The word hung heavy. I shook my head slowly. You put us here. You dragged me into your debts, into your lies, and now you want me to pull you out again. I didn't mean to, he whispered. I thought I could carry it. I thought I could protect you from it. Protect me? My laugh was sharp, bitter. You used me, Darius. Every time you called, every time you begged, every time you let me believe I was saving you. You weren't protecting me. You were bleeding me dry. His hand slammed against the table, rattling the salt shaker. What was I supposed to do? Let them take everything? Let them take me? I didn't flinch. Maybe you were supposed to take responsibility. He sagged back into the booth, breath ragged. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the neon light above buzzed like static, filling the silence. Finally, he looked at me, his voice breaking. I don't deserve you, Eloin. I know that. But if you walk away now, it won't just be me who suffers. It'll be Maribel, the baby. They don't deserve this. The words pierced deeper than I wanted to admit. I thought of Maribel's trembling voice on the phone, of her confession laced with fear. I thought of the child, innocent in all of this, sleeping while debts circled the house like wolves. I closed my eyes, torn. Family, obligation, love, the chains I had worn for so long pressed against me again. But then I thought of the keepsake box, the candlesticks, my father's voice saying, whatever you place inside should outlast you. And I knew. I opened my eyes. You're right about one thing. They don't deserve this, but neither do I, and I won't carry your debts anymore. He stared at me, silent, waiting. I'll help Maribel, I said slowly. I'll make sure the baby has what they need, but you... My voice hardened. You're on your own. Shock flickered across his face, then anger, then something close to grief. You can't do that. I already have. The silence between us stretched, taut as wire. Finally, he dropped his gaze, his shoulders sinking. For the first time, I saw him not as my brother, not as the boy sneaking into my room after nightmares, but as a man cornered by his own choices. We left the diner without another word. That night, back home, I unlocked the study and pulled the keepsake box from the cabinet. I opened the lid, the silver candlesticks gleaming faintly in the lamplight. I traced their curves with my fingers, remembering the hands that had passed them down. They were meant to bless a future, to honor history. And I realized they could not go to Darius, not yet, maybe not ever. I closed the lid gently, locking it once more, not as punishment, not as vengeance, but as preservation. For someone who would understand that legacy is not a debt to exploit, but a gift to honor. As I slid the box back into the cabinet, a calmness settled over me. For years, I had equated family with obligation, love with sacrifice, silence with loyalty, but now I saw them differently. Family is not who drains you. Family is who stands with you. Love is not silence. Love is respect. Legacy is not inherited by blood alone. It is earned by choice. I turned off the light and stood in the doorway, looking back one last time. The study was quiet, the boxes resting side by side, the past and the future. I closed the door, and for the first time in years, I felt free.